Somewhere in your garden right now, a tomato plant is quietly dying, and it has nothing to do with the weather, your watering schedule, or bad luck. It has to do with a mineral you were never taught to think about, and a $2 bag of crystals that most home gardeners walk past 100 times without ever picking up. Almost nobody realizes that the plant sagging in their backyard isn't finished, it's starving. And the fix has been sitting on hardware store shelves this entire time, ignored, because there's no profit in something this cheap. Welcome to NexReveal, the channel where we dig up the knowledge that got buried under decades of marketing, convenience, and forgotten tradition. If you've ever grown a tomato plant that gave you a few good weeks of fruit and then quietly gave up, stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why that happened and how generations of self-reliant growers kept their plants producing long after everyone else had pulled theirs out of the ground. Here's what most people believe. A tomato plant has a lifespan. You plant it, it grows, it fruits for a while, and eventually it slows down and dies because that's simply what tomato plants do. It's treated like a countdown timer built into the seed itself. But that belief isn't really about biology. It's about the calendar of a retail industry that depends on you buying new plants every single spring. Here's what actually happens. A tomato plant's decline is almost never about age. It's about a nutrient deficiency that produces symptoms so subtle, most gardeners misread them completely. The plant starts pulling nutrients away from its flowers to protect its own survival, which means the blossoms drop before they ever become fruit. You see yellowing leaves and assume it's heat stress or an insect or simply the season winding down. In reality, the plant is sending a very specific signal, and almost nobody in a garden center will tell you what it means because the answer to that signal doesn't come in a $14 bottle. The scientific principle behind this is straightforward once you see it. Magnesium sits at the center of every chlorophyll molecule in the plant. Chlorophyll is what allows a leaf to capture sunlight and convert it into usable energy. Without enough magnesium, the conversion process breaks down, and the plant simply cannot generate enough energy to keep producing flowers and fruit at the rate it wants to. It protects its core structure first and sacrifices reproduction second, which in gardening terms means fewer tomatoes, smaller tomatoes, or none at all. This is not folklore. Agricultural extension services and university horticulture departments have documented magnesium deficiency as one of the most common and most overlooked issues in home garden soil, particularly in soil that has grown the same crops season after season without real replenishment. The mineral responsible for correcting this is magnesium sulfate, more commonly known by its old household name, Epsom Salt. And its story goes back further than most people expect. In the early 17th century, in the English town of Epsom, farmers noticed something strange about a natural mineral spring on their land. Cattle that drank from it thrived. Grass around it grew noticeably greener and healthier than grass anywhere else on the property. Long before anyone understood chemistry the way we do now, people were already observing cause and effect and passing that observation down through generations of practical, self-taught agriculture. That kind of knowledge didn't disappear. It moved with settlers, tenant farmers, and self-sufficient rural communities who relied on their own land rather than a supply chain. Families who farmed without modern conveniences kept a sack of these crystals in the barn out of necessity, not trend, because a garden that failed meant a winter that failed. This wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was survival math. And that context matters, because it explains why this remedy never needed a marketing budget. It only needed to work. But that's only part of the story, because knowing the mineral matters isn't the same as knowing how to use it correctly. The application method changes everything. Dissolved into water at a ratio of roughly 1 tablespoon per gallon and applied at the base of the plant, magnesium sulfate feeds the root system gradually over several days. This is the traditional slow method, effective but patient. There's a second method that works dramatically faster, because the underside of a tomato leaf is covered in microscopic openings called stomata, through which the plant exchanges gas and moisture with the air. In the cool hours shortly after sunrise, those openings are at their widest. A fine mist of diluted magnesium sulfate applied directly to the underside of the leaves during that window gets absorbed almost immediately, bypassing the slower route through roots and soil entirely. Growers who understood this timing could visibly darken pale, struggling foliage within a single day, and often saw dropped blossoms return to setting fruit within under a week. If this is the kind of practical knowledge you want more of, the plain, tested information that never made it onto a product label, this is exactly what NexReveal exists to uncover. Subscribe and stay close, because the deeper this goes, the more it challenges what you thought you understood about your own backyard. Here's where things become genuinely interesting, because magnesium alone doesn't explain how a plant could theoretically keep fruiting indefinitely. That answer requires unlearning something almost every home gardener has been taught since childhood. In its native range in the warm regions of South America, the tomato is not an annual plant at all. It is a perennial vine capable of living and fruiting across multiple years in a row, The reason it dies in most home gardens has nothing to do with the plant reaching some biological limit. It's frost. Cold kills it before age ever gets the chance to. This distinction matters enormously, because if the plant itself isn't programmed to quit, then the traditional yearly cycle of buying, planting, and discarding is largely a matter of convention rather than necessity. Growers who understood this could propagate a single genetic line of tomato plant across many seasons through a remarkably simple method: taking a healthy side shoot, rooting it in water until small white roots formed, and transplanting it as a genetically identical continuation of the original plant. No specialized equipment, no seed packet, just patience and a glass of water on a windowsill. A cutting taken before the first frost and kept alive indoors through winter could be used to start an entirely new outdoor plant the following spring, meaning a gardener theoretically never needed to purchase another tomato plant again. The deeper question worth sitting with is why this information isn't common knowledge, given how simple and low cost it is. The most reasonable explanation isn't some grand conspiracy, it's economics. An industry built around annual plant sales and specialty fertilizer bottles has no incentive to widely publicize a $2 mineral and a windowsill propagation trick that essentially removes the customer from the sales cycle entirely. That doesn't make the information hidden in some sinister sense. It simply makes it unprofitable to advertise, which in a media-driven marketplace often functions the same way. There are real limitations worth acknowledging honestly. Magnesium sulfate corrects a magnesium deficiency. It does nothing for a plant suffering from a different problem entirely, like inconsistent watering, calcium deficiency, or pest damage, and over-applying it can actually crowd out calcium uptake, contributing to the disorder known as blossom end rot. Balance and moderation, roughly once every 2 weeks, is what the evidence supports, not daily application. Likewise, keeping a tomato line alive across years through cuttings requires consistent indoor care during colder months and won't suit every climate or every gardener's schedule. This isn't magic. It's mineral chemistry and plant biology working exactly the way they're supposed to when you stop fighting against them. What makes this story worth telling isn't just the mineral or the propagation trick individually, it's what they represent together. A reminder that some of the most effective solutions were never lost, only quietly priced out of the conversation by more profitable alternatives. The generations who relied on this knowledge weren't operating on superstition. They were running careful, repeated observation across real seasons where failure had real consequences. And what survived that process earned its place through results, not branding. If NexReveal has given you something today worth carrying into your own garden, that's exactly the kind of forgotten, practical knowledge this channel is built to uncover, one overlooked truth at a time. Because the real story was never that your tomato plant was destined to fail. It was that nobody profitable ever needed you to know it wasn't.